We do have a quorum. Take a motion to approve the agenda and minutes, please.
So moved.
Second,
I'll second it.
all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carried. Rich Brown wasn't gonna make it today. He's out surveying the east, northeast side of the county. With the road crew, took quite a beating over there. So he called this morning, said he wouldn't be around. Any drainage? Nothing? Claims, you guys have a claims list?
Yes.
Questions or comments on it?
I did not know.
Take a motion to approve the claims.
I'll make a motion to approve the claims.
Second,
I'll second.
all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried.
Payroll too.
Okay.
Payroll claims?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, there's a motion, there's a second.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried.
No reports, no payroll eligibility, no liquor license.
Man, I'm rolling through this one.
Trying.
Manure management plan.
Oh, I guess you don't need it. I sent it to you.
Yes. Yep, did you guys read that? They just added some acres for
Yep.
fertilizer, right? Sounded was the only change. To take a motion to acknowledge the manure management plan for the Johnson South Farm and Joyce.
I'll make a motion.
Right, there's a second.
Yeah, I'll second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, that has been acknowledged.
Okay, that resolution is basically, I've been advised to create a fund for that money so that it is,
Separate
Yeah,
and able
separate
to
and-
spend or whatever kind of.
you know, and track and all that good stuff, so.
Yeah. Well, it's a resolution, 2021.08.30, American Rescue Plan Act Fund, just creating a fund, for those dollars to be used and spent through the county, however the government tells us we can spend them, so. Yeah.
Whenever that is.
Yep, so take a motion to approve the resolution 2021.08.30.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, we will do a roll call vote. Lowberg,
Aye.
Smithy,
Aye.
Stone, aye. Resolution passed.
I'll put them with the rest. Not
North
going to-
Betco. Well,
And I
was
stole.
able to get on yet or not?
I have not seen her.
She said, she sent me a message, said she's on hold. There's some, stuff over there. May jump on later, if she does, we'll get back to her. All right, Jeff Gorball. How you doing this morning?
Good, how are you?
Not bad.
Uh, With a couple of, relatively compared to other times, short comment and then bunch of questions. So just as a matter of background, March 8th, the supervisors first had discussions related to a moratorium on commercial wind development to allow time to be spent on research and decisions related to that type of development in the county. April 12th, after hearing from citizen concerns and discussing the board members' own concerns related to wind energy development, as well as updates from Invenergy indicating they're still in the land study stages of planning, the board passed a moratorium on commercial wind development in the county. That resolution called for research into the question of what type of guidance or ordinance should be in place in the county relative to commercial wind, given that there was nothing currently in place to guide or control energy companies' use of county land in the vast majority of the county. On April 21st, as called for by the supervisors, the zoning commission took up work on that question related to land use for commercial wind development. And over the course of the following months, with input and conversations from all primary stakeholders, research of ordinances in counties across Iowa, review of issues and guidance related to such development from state and federal agencies and authoritative peer-reviewed science publications, input from county citizens, and open meeting conversations with the public on the proposed points of a draft ordinance, the zoning commission presented recommendations to the supervisors on June 28th. The recommendations presented to the supervisors included a draft of an ordinance related to commercial wind development regulating land use across the entire county. It was passed by the commission as a unanimous recommendation to the supervisors to take the draft and consider it for approval as an ordinance in the county. Subsequent to submission of those recommendations, the supervisors were presented with and discussed a number of questions that required legal review. On July 17th, the supervisors selected a law firm to conduct a review of the questions posed, the draft ordinance proposed by the zoning commissions, and questions related to proposed agreements from Invenergy. On August 17th, the supervisors received a response from the law firm during a closed session. I would note that during this time, while the county officials were taking these actions under the direction by the supervisors and known to all interested parties, that Invenergy essentially disregarded these county activities known to them, even after requests for engagement in the process. Instead, they pursued direct conversations with individual supervisors on a nearly monthly basis in an attempt to preempt this process and pressure signing of an agreement drafted by Invenergy. While the legal questions of the supervisors were under legal review, Invenergy showed up at the supervisors meeting on August 9th with their legal counsel, and again prompted the supervisors to sign their agreement. They also presented a proposed development overview, but up until recently had refused to make those details public. Actually, we do have a copy of that now. I think Joel's going to have that on the website so the public can see it. Clearly, they're anxious to forego the activities of the county and begin work. So it's now essentially September, and 6 months have passed since the conversations began in earnest. My purpose here today is to have a discussion with the supervisors so that I can provide an update to the zoning commission on the direction of the supervisors relative to our recommendations. I also believe that the supervisors may have questions for us as a result of their conversation with legal counsel. As a reminder, our recommendations were derived at in consultation and conversations with the public, and among all the input we received, a vast majority was in support of the details in our recommended draft. I call that out because those details are dramatically different than what Invenergy has proposed in their agreement. I'd also point out that by signing the Invenergy agreement would effectively eliminate the ability of the Board of Adjustment to establish conditions as part of their role in conditional use permits under current zoning rules. In short, signed agreements with Invenergy should come at the end of the application process, not before. What I mean by that is if you do nothing and they submit applications, if you permit those applications to come through, which you shouldn't because we have a moratorium right now in place, but if those applications were acted on without the ordinance being passed, the zoning rules would apply, and the zoning rules would require conditional use permits in Heartland and Brookfield Township for the turbines there. If you sign an agreement before those conditional use permits are heard by the Board of Adjustment, the Board of Adjustment's hands are tied. They're pretty much worthless. So signing an agreement with Invenergy would preempt all of the activities that should happen, whether through existing zoning or a new commercial wind ordinance. Now, there's serious consequences to contemplate when considering the options available to the supervisors. At a broad brush, there seems to be two basic options available. Continue the status quo of no rules and agree to sign the Invenergy drafted agreement and just rely on zoning in 2 of the townships, or take action on the passage of an ordinance as proposed by the zoning commission. With regard to option 2, the passage of an ordinance, that ordinance includes a requirement for agreements with wind energy developers, but calls for a broader range of protections and details to be included in the agreements than what Invenergy is proposing. At this point, I'd like to close my written remarks and engage in conversation with the supervisors so that the zoning commission and public can understand where we might be going, and so that I can update the zoning commission on the work that they performed and delivered. To get that conversation started, now that you've had review by legal counsel, I guess my first basic question is, what direction are you leaning and what are the next steps with regard to the zoning commission recommendations?
Well, since we were closed session and there was discussion litigation, we gotta be real
Yep.
cautious
understand.
on what information.
Yeah, I'm not
we
asking
back
what
up.
information was passed. It's just You
Yeah,
guys have,
we're still in conversation. We have not heard back from, our legal counsel on, a few changes that we wanted to see. Basically, we're not prepared, yet to sign any agreements with anybody. Until we can make sure that the agreement benefits the county first and Invenergy second. So, that's kind of where we left that. So as far as the ordinance thing, to me, we're looking at seeing how this rest of this plays out in terms of whether we go ordinance or not. I agree, and I believe there will be an ordinance, my opinion, but we're trying just to see what the best direction to go is with our legal counsel first, so that we make sure that all the steps are done properly and we don't leave anything behind, so that we miss something, you know.
yeah, I would again make note that from a precedent perspective, without regard to whether we rely on existing zoning or we have a new ordinance, in either case, there needs to be an agreement signed with Invenergy. And the ordinance details a lot of different things that an agreement would be expected to cover beyond the three kinds of things that Invenergy is talking about with regard to setback, sound, and flicker. There's things like, well, what happens if a turbine fails? You know, what kinds of repair requirements are there? Drainage issues, you know, after the fact drainage repairs. Once these things are decommissioned, what happens? What has to happen in order for the energy company to transfer the project to somebody else? I mean, there's a lot of different things that the ordinance lays out should be spelled out in the agreement with whatever energy company. And so given that an agreement is necessary in either situation, I would presume to suggest that the board consider the ordinance first, whether you make changes to it or what have you, but you consider passage of an ordinance first, then the agreement. Because if you sign an agreement in advance of considering the ordinance is moot. The agreement takes precedent. Again, not asking what council has said to the board. Has that been a part of the conversation, that kind of consideration?
I
don't think so.
Basically, we're trying to figure out the best route to take to avoid litigation.
Mhm.
But if it comes to that, then that's the step we would have to take. We're trying to decipher the vested rights position and where we would go if we did or did not sign an agreement, or if we did or did not run the ordinance.
Yeah, now, even if you decide that, and again, you know, it's your guys' call and the consequences and so on. If you decide that we're not gonna consider a vote on any ordinance at this time, or, you know, for who knows how long, but you're going to pursue the path of least resistance, if you will, with an agreement with Invenergy, there's no reason why the terms that are existing in that Invenergy agreement have to be the terms. Those are Invenergy's terms, right? It's the county's land, the county's rights, you know, the citizens' land and the citizens' rights. There's no reason why you can't take terms that are in the ordinance expectations that are in the ordinance and incorporate those into an agreement with Invenergy. Signing an agreement should be a negotiation between both parties, not just simply, here it is, sign it.
Yeah.
Because it is county and county citizens' land, Invenergy should be molding their project to fit and not vice versa.
Right.
I had another question, which I'll ask it rhetorically, but I think you've already said that you don't feel appropriate to be able to answer it based on legal counsel. And that was whether you believe that Invenergy should be required to adhere to the terms of an ordinance. You haven't decided if you're going to pursue the ordinance yet or not. So I guess.
Yeah, not till basically we can see what legal counsel, I guess, would recommend for us to do as far as what step is the best step.
Mm,
So as of right now, yeah, I was hoping we'd hear something back by now, but maybe we will this week. To see where we end up with the changes we've asked
So-
in the agreement.
is the guiding force with what council is looking at? Is it avoidance of litigation from Invenergy?
It's not necessarily avoidance, but it is what's in best interest for us. He'll do whatever we ask him to do. And if we wanna try to reach an agreement that is a benefit for the county, we may go that route, but if we wanna try to fight tooth and nail all the way, he'll go that route with us too. So basically, it's kinda,
And that's why I was
Yeah.
trying to get a sense of the supervisor, because that's what I expected the council will do. Legal counsel would say, what direction do you want me to pursue? And that's the direction that you're paying me and I'll pursue.
Yeah.
And that's why it boils down to, trying to get a sense of, what is the sense of direction from the supervisors. There were, not just the zoning commission, but, a lot of people have a lot of interest in what was put together as that proposed ordinance.
Mhm.
And trying to get an understanding as to, and we did so because that's what the moratorium was originally put in place for, was let's take a pause, let's look at this issue and see what kinds of rules should be in place. And I think that the work that everybody put into it, there are a lot of different views reflected in there, and I think it's a good consensus. It provides a clear path forward for these kinds of projects in the county. It does establish a set of rules that they haven't had before, and let's make no mistake, they're here to put stuff in place and make tens of millions of dollars. They want the easiest path forward. That's why they're doing this. They're not doing this to give us money. They're doing it to make money, and they're giving us some along the way. So they don't want to have to abide by any rules. So that said, I know they presented a presentation to the county on August 9th. And I looked through that presentation and I noted that they had submitted their broad project scope to the Iowa DNR in 2019, and Iowa DNR had responded to them in a letter and said, all right, we've assessed your project boundaries. We've got some considerable concerns about some of the areas within your project boundaries. And they delivered that letter to Invenergy. It was a letter dated June 7th. It was actually an environmental consultant that Invenergy had hired for the project. Looking at what DNR told them, and DNR used language in their letter of strong recommendations. DNR didn't say you can or cannot. It was just strong recommendations. And so DNR gave strong recommendations to Invenergy, but looking at what Invenergy put together in the presentation that they gave, it looks like that they didn't go along with those DNR recommendations. There are very significant differences between what DNR strongly recommended and what they actually did. And I found it interesting that Invenergy stated in their presentation, in the writing part of the presentation, that saying a recent meeting with DNR, DNR did not have concerns with their buffers planned. I think that needs to be reconciled, and there should be some questions. So for instance, their DNR said that they strongly recommend a 2-mile buffer for wildlife management areas. Invenergy did 1 mile. DNR said you should have a 1-mile buffer for other protected areas. Invenergy did a 0.5 mile. DNR said 40-acre tracts should have a woodland should have a 0.5 mile buffer. Invenergy did 1,000 feet. DNR said Eagle Nest should have a 5-mile buffer. Invenergy did a 1-mile buffer, but Invenergy seemed to pick their own Eagle Nest sites. They did not use the Iowa DNR known Eagle Nest sites. If you look at the Invenergy document, it showed, I believe, 2 Eagle Nest sites. Iowa DNR said within the project area, there's 5 of them, 5 of them. Nope, 6, I'm sorry, I can't count. 6 of them within the project area. And I know, and that was from 2020 data. These, if you look at the 2020 report with the 2019 data, 5 of these 6 were there in 2019. And I know that this year, I know that there were 2 additional ones. I put a little X in between Northwood and Kensett, where I know there are two additional active eagle nests. So and then also DNR separately recommended that in several sections that DNR identified by range, township, section number, DNR said that they recommend no turbines in those sections. I overlaid as best I could. It was kind of difficult to see the Invenergy's map, but I overlaid Invenergy's map of turbines with the sections that DNR highlighted. You'll see 2 different colors on this map. DNR had in their letter 2 different paragraphs that they were saying, we recommend no turbines in these sections for this reason. And then another section, they said, we recommend no turbines in these sections for this reason. And that's the highlighted sections. There's at least 24 of the 56 turbines that are on Invenergy's plans. There are at least 24 of them that fall squarely inside sections that DNR strongly recommended no turbines be installed. And so this, coupled with what they did relative to Invenergy's other, relative to DNR's other recommendations, I think there's questions that need to go back to Invenergy with regard to their project. And how did they determine that it's okay that they should put these turbines here contrary to Iowa DNR recommendations? Maybe they've got some other mitigations that they've planned, I don't know. But just on the face, it seems that they've disregarded Iowa DNR recommendations. Another question I have is, I know they've talked about 1,500 feet setback to residents. Our draft says property line. without getting into that, I think we've already given the rationale for how the zoning commission, or, the zoning commission came up with property line versus residence. One of the points I would make is that 1,500 feet number was a number that has been used for 20 years for the size turbines that were installed 20 years ago. It's been recognized even by the supervisors, and Invenergy has said that the turbines that they're anticipating are larger than anything that they've installed. And the zoning commission, when we were looking at this, recognized that you can't simply have a fixed distance safety zone for the turbines because the turbines grow. And so we went through and looked at the sizes, looked at the various safety zones, and came up with a multiplier that's in the ordinance. So the ordinance says 1,600 feet from property line for the reasons that we've previously stated, or 3.75 times the height of the turbine, whichever is greater, or the safety distance designated by the manufacturer of the turbine for fire, etc. So even if these things are going to be in an agreement, if you don't go the ordinance route, I think those kinds of considerations need to come into play. The 1,500 feet is simply, from a safety zone perspective, not at all adequate for the size turbines that they're describing. The other thing that raised a question is with regard to the things that Invenergy is suggesting in their agreement. Whatever those things fall out to, if we go an agreement route as opposed to ordinance, they've not said what happens if these things are not compliant with these terms. And that absolutely, again, we have language to address that kind of a circumstance in the draft ordinance. And once again, from a zoning commission perspective, we're partial towards the ordinance that we had drafted. But again, I just call out attention to, there's a lot of terms that are established, a lot of requirements that are established in there that if you go the pure agreement route, I would really recommend that some of those things be incorporated in there, because you can't just simply say, well, we're going to have this sound, this shadow, and this distance. And then they do like what happened out here. They wind up in different locations and they don't meet those requirements. There has to be teeth in that. What happens if they don't make it? I also noted on their presentation that they had, with regard to shadow and sound, it appeared to be standard contours that were drawn around each turbine location, whether it be shadow, flicker, or sound. They were just, it's almost like a rubber stamp. Here's a turbine, boom, here's the sound pattern, here's the sound pattern, it's the same sound pattern, same shadow flicker range on every one. One, just from a terrain perspective, that's not possible. So it calls into question, what are the details behind their sound analysis that says, here's the range, people aren't going to be subjected to anything more than X. I think we should ask that information be provided to the county, so that there can be an acoustician look at those things. There's a lot of different ways, when we were researching this, that the sound can be measured and can be modeled. And there's a lot of the scientific literature that was describing methods that should or should not be used. And when you look at just a standard contour pattern around every single turbine, it just calls into question the reality of what that's ultimately going to be on the ground. So I think that deserves to be looked at as well. I think those are the questions that I had. I will leave you with just some additional thoughts I had had. I guess just in closing, when we have our zoning commission meeting on Wednesday, I just want to affirm what I should be telling the commission members as far as the effort on the draft. That right now, there are still questions under legal review. The board has not yet decided on a direction, whether it be consider the ordinance first or set the recommended ordinance aside and just pursue an agreement. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, until we hear from legal counsel again on recommendations, because all of those questions you just asked were brought up and were going to be addressed in any agreements. So we're still waiting to hear back on that. So basically, nothing's on the table yet, nothing's off the table yet, until we get the guidance on which direction is the best to go. We are working on it, obviously, and as soon as we can, we're gonna try. As soon as we hear from him, then we'll know which direction to go. So
'Cause I know
hopefully-
everybody's anxious about it.
Yeah,
Clearly, Invenergy is anxious, wanting to get going. We can't really do anything until the board decides what kind of direction we're gonna go.
right. And I would like to tell you more, but right now we've gotta make sure we're on.
Yeah,
we're on even
understand
keel
what's
there, but,
under legal consideration.
um,
Okay, well,
So I guess that's all I can tell you for now, Jeff, is let them know, I mean, well, the hard work they did put in is not off the table yet. And we just have to, we're trying to make the right decision all the way around here on this farm. And we're not sure we're close, but we're just not sure which direction to go there yet.
Okay.
To be proper.
just while I have the floor, just a quick segue update on the other zoning commission work. We did have a meeting with just a phone conversation meeting I did with NICOG representative with regard to development plan. So we'll be discussing Wednesday night a litany of things that NICOG has said that they can do. So we'll discuss that as a commission, decide what kinds of things that we need NICOG research on to bring up the state of the county information. And then NICOG will put that together as a proposal for the supervisors to sign off on before any of that work starts. So,
Yeah, perfect. I'm glad that's underway as well.
Yep.
Okay. Is there any questions or comments for Jeff?
So,
okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. Good goats. How are you this morning?
I'm good.
Good.
Okay, if I sit there, Jen, is that okay? Thanks for letting me in today, and I just want to give a public thank you to Mr. Gorball for all the hard work and excellent effort he has given. My talk kind of segues onto his. I would just note at first, I made a comment here after Mr. Gorball's talk that the Iowa Land Records does show that Invenergy has continued to seek and obtain easements during the moratorium phase. So as you know, Invenergy representative Mark Kroll, accompanied by legal representation, did come to you guys and make that August 9th Worth County presentation. And I'm here today to give some rebuttal clarification to some of the claims and comments he made in that presentation. Mr. Kroll started the presentation saying he felt it was a really good time to give a full overview of the project. Really? I think a good time would have been back in 2018 before they signed their first easement agreement. Invenergy's method of operation, their MO, has been to literally invade a county with stealth tactics and get as many easement agreements signed as possible. Absentee landowners are a major target, and we have evidence of the nefarious tactics being used and the less than scrupulous land agents making claims. Now, not all companies do business this way. Recently in Kansas, a county there, Cherokee County, met with a wind developer, RWE, to gauge interest in an industrial wind installation. And discussion on the potential preventative measures will continue. This is before any easement agreements were ever done. So not all wind developers feel the need to do business as Invenergy does. Now, Invenergy choosing to do business in this manner, that is procure easements, spend money on studies before talking to the supervisors in a county without a wind ordinance in place, this is a risk they accepted. Well, at times it may work in their favor. At other times, the lack of regulations and procedures may hamper a project. Invenergy chose to take this risk. At the 5.5-minute mark, Mark makes the comment that Worth County has historically been supportive of these types of projects. Poppycock. These are not the projects of 20 years ago. I'm quite certain that Invenergy is aware of the changes that have happened on the Worth County Board of Supervisors, especially as they have had their flunkies, the Iowa Environmental Council, work to get their favored candidates elected. Indeed, 2 of you on the board were elected in no small part because of your support of regulations on renewables. There has been significant opposition to industrial wind. Certainly the Crows, the concerned residents of Worth and Winnebago, has formed, and there's over 700 members. I know that they're not all from Worth County, but there's a significant number that are. At the planning and zoning meeting in Kensett, the support of the wind ordinance was overwhelming. At that June 16th public meeting of the Worth County Zoning Commission, 25 times people took up the microphone and addressed the board. Only one resident spoke clearly in favor of wind power. A petition has been circulated and presented to the board with over 300 names gathered in a very short period of time. 82% of the residents who live in the project footprint in Norway Township, Winnebago County, oppose the project according to a resident survey. 82%. Now, who has surveyed the residents of the remainder of the project area, where Mr. Kroll tells us there's very little opposition? This percentage of opposition mirrors that found in my area of the county, where I personally canvassed the area. Indeed, rural America is fighting back against large-scale renewable energy projects across the United States. Since 2015, about 300 government entities, including boards of supervisors such as yourselves, have moved to reject or restrict wind energy projects. Mr. Kroll spent a significant amount of time on the environmental portion, and Mr. Gorbal very well spoke to this. I have to wonder if it kind of maybe was a little bit in response. Remember when I came here and presented you that letter, which you should all have a copy of, or I can certainly give you, that my presentation on DNR recommendations that indicate the area with its unique environmental resources and geography is not a good site for industrial wind or solar. Mr. Kroll pointed out several times that Invenergy filed the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service guidelines. So what does this mean? These guidelines are voluntary. There is no oversight. Now, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Agency does have oversight of the Migratory Bird Act. So essentially, if Invenergy follows the service's guidelines, that protects the companies from accidental takes, that is the killing of birds. So when an eagle is killed, if the company can then show that they followed the service guidelines, the company can evade the heavy fines that can be imposed on them. The 82-page document by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service states, it can promote effective communication among wind developers, federal, state, and local conservation agencies. As of August 9th, Mr. Kroll admitted to not having met with the Worth County's conservation head. The document also notes it is to be used in concert with appropriate regulatory tools. Mr. Kroll spent a significant amount of time on the raptor, eagle's nest, and avian use surveys. Invenergy's findings show that the eagles stay out of a large majority of the project footprint. Now, has anyone told the eagles they need to stay in their lanes, that they need to stay out of the project footprint? How are we going to notify the eagles that they need to do this? Mr. Kroll also notes that they have been in consultation with the DNR, and the DNR didn't express any concerns with the approach taken. This is just more spin. The DNR has no regulatory capacity. That is part of our problem here in Iowa. They do not oversee the environmental studies. You have seen the DNR review for natural resources for the project area. Who has the more unbiased report? The DNR or Invenergy? Has Invenergy ever stopped a project due to environmental concerns? As far as the development agreement, as Mr. Gorbal said, the details are dramatically different than the proposed ordinance. Invenergy says you'll be getting everything you want with the development agreement. This is not so. I speak to the shadow flicker, 30 hours or less, it should be 0. There is technology for this. And if the shadow flicker is such a minute amount, then it shouldn't be that big of a deal to them to make it 0. The 50 dBA sound level, this is unacceptable. dBA, it is an average. The average of 0 and 100 is 50. Sound must be given as dBA max. I defer to the proposed ordinance for solid noise verbiage. Listing sound levels as dBA is worthless. I point out a home in the Freeborn Wind Project. The Venichek's house is, I believe, about 1,600 feet from the nearest turbine. The sound can be horrendous. It's tragic. Again, they give the average for the setback for the project is 3,100 feet. Well, that's great if you're not the house that's 1,600 feet from a 600-foot plus turbine. It's average. Does this average include the larger setbacks from the environmental protected areas such as Silver Lake? That's going to skew your average. What does average mean? Attorney Dublinsky stated that there are no guarantees that the rule aesthetic can be maintained. He stated a neighbor may put up a large building or an independent manufacturer may do a startup. My response is that that is the reason for zoning, to separate conflicting uses of land. And there's not many 50-story buildings with spinning 520 feet blades on top going up in our area cornfields. Worth County Planning and Zoning did their due diligence. They put time, effort, and thoughtful consideration into the drafting of this ordinance. Rationale is given, and it contains a means of checks and balances. It has teeth. I have not seen Invenergy's development agreement. How does it compare? Invenergy likely will not be the engineer or owner of the proposed wind installation. How will the next corporation heed this agreement? How did that work out in Deer Creek? Invenergy is working for Invenergy and investor profits. The ordinance does not prevent a company from placing companies closer to property line. It does require the company to reach out to all residents, whether they own 2,000 acres or 2, and negotiate with them. It puts the siting of the turbines in the developer's hands. I thank you for your time. I know that the thought of litigation is not pleasant for anyone. Sometimes you just got to do what's right. Any questions for me?
Thank you for your input. Appreciate it, Julie. People service, Chris.
I sent you guys my report last week. Any questions on that?
So,
Wastewater plant, I've had 3 weeks in a row with no detect on ammonia, so crossing my fingers that everything's going good again.
we got through a couple weekends, busier weekends, and it still came up good.
Yep.
Good. Well, it's a good deal. I did read that letter he sent to DNR, which stated everything good, and that's usually what they ask for, so.
Yep.
Oh, that's fine. Like I said, I hate to have to start the other half of that plan up, but
Right, so just increase all our costs.
increase the cost and we're not generating any more revenues.
Right.
We don't have the same revenues, so.
Right, we're gonna double our expense and create
Right.
more income.
Yeah, so, okay.
So that's all I have, unless you guys have something.
Have you been talked to by, I was gonna ask Rich, but he wasn't here, the contractor out there, where are they gonna get their water from? Have you heard anything? Are they getting it from us
The road
or?
guy.
What contract?
The road.
Road
Oh,
contractors.
nobody's contacted me.
Yeah, the road crew out there, because they had that discussion where they're gonna pull water from, because, well, at the time, you know, they said drainage ditch or something possibly, but wasn't much rolling through there, but now I'm sure they'll be running a little
few
better for a
days it
while.
will be, but otherwise it's pretty stagnant.
So is there access close?
Yeah, we can, if you guys want to let them have water, we can give them water.
I just don't know if there's a good place to fill from or not.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty decent hydrant in the new development that would probably work the best.
Yeah.
They could just whip around and,
Yeah, I don't know if they're gonna have tanks set up there.
I suppose they have their own tank, I mean, storage tank.
Yeah.
I mean.
they put a
usually
batch plant out there somewhere?
Yeah, and
Where at?
where
Across
the
from
fireworks
the
were,
Oh, that's where they shipped that, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, yep, where that fireworks place owns a little triangle. piece
Yep, yep.
right there. I don't know if there's a way to run a hose through a culvert nearby off a hydrant there or not. to get
There
'em.
would be.
Yeah,
right
because
there.
the culvert beat to the north by our driveway, by the north driveway.
Yeah.
There's a culvert just south of that about 200 feet.
Yeah.
We have to run the pipe through there and then back to them.
I didn't know if they had asked or not. if
No,
we're-
nobody's contacted me.
Okay, and we're capable if they need it.
I think, I don't know how much water they will use. I don't know.
Quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm not sure what their daily usage would be, but if they run through 8,000-10,000 gallons a day or more than that, not a clue. Not a clue.
We could do, we can pump 160,000 gallons a day, no problem. So I mean, if they need 50,000 a day, we can handle that.
Right, okay.
But they probably would work Friday night, Friday night, Saturday nights are our big nights.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if they go straight.
They're
through.
probably gonna put mix in at about 5, probably 6.
Yeah, they work the weekends, maybe.
Yeah, they work
I
weekends.
think they work the
Depends
weekends,
when
but
they're
yeah,
on
you're
schedule or
right.
not.
They work well.
Depends on their
How
schedule.
far
They
behind
do.
they are.
They do so much a day, I think, so people
Right.
can get in and out too. I
Right.
think, So,
They pre-plan it, yeah.
yeah, they try to plan.
Get to
that.
this point, get to that point, because then they can keep local traffic flowing.
Yeah.
Right.
Not just curious if they'd contacted or not, I guess, so.
We really don't have a rate for stuff like that. That's the only,
Yeah,
because in the past, we've just charged them, because it's only like, I think our ordinance is about 75 1,000. It's nothing.
right, right.
Yeah.
I know a lot of places are closer to at least like a penny a gallon
Right.
for bulk water like that, instead of being a regular user, so. I guess we'll have
Because always ever, we tell somebody like a boring crew, they get 2 tanks of water, they want 4,000 gallons of water. That was all they ever took. It was no big deal.
Well, we'll have to figure that out when we do our water rates and stuff out there anyways.
Yeah, something to add into it.
Rate,
Yeah,
just to have it there in case.
something like that comes around
Right.
again.
Well, and that was a discussion with like connection fees too, because, you're gonna go there and inspect it. Well, we should try to regenerate some of that money if you using your time to go there. So
Mhm.
we're not gonna go crazy on it, but at least something
Right.
to recoup the funds that you
Right.
put time into it. So.
There's only been one paid, and that was that, and I was like $1,800 or something for a water hookup to the Holiday Inn.
Really. Connection fee.
But then you kept that, they didn't, that was a senior thing.
Oh, right, right. So at least that would come back to the county anyway, so.
Right.
Now,
Now,
okay, so anything else, Chris? All right, thank you, sir.
Yep.
Board appointment for Homeward Incorporated, any yet?
I texted her and she hasn't returned my text. I guess I'll try to track her down.
Okay, sounds good. Department head discussion. Any good knowledge? No?
Wentworth Beth goes on again.
Oh, Melissa, you on there?
Good morning.
Also,
Good. Unfortunately, my household has a positive case of COVID. So I'm waiting for direction from HR and my next steps. But in the meantime, that NDA was executed between Alliant and that prospect for Manly. So that'll be active as of tomorrow. On September 9th, I have a site visit with a developer for the interchange. This is a new inquiry, so it's pretty exciting. If any of you would like to visit with the developer, open invitation for you.
time,
He needs to leave the area by 2, so I haven't set a specific time yet. He is also interested in talking to any businesses that are looking to expand to the area. So I'm going to keep the 2 businesses that I have reached out to over the past year in mind for that as well. Hopefully they can find time that day as too.
Yeah, I could come anytime, probably after 10. I mean, and then, I mean, I'm not sure who's gonna be there. I have a dentist appointment at 9, but otherwise I could be there as soon as I get done.
I'm thinking 10 too, if he's coming from Des Moines.
Yeah,
Just let me know. I should be able to make it work.
send an email.
Okay.
Yeah.
The time on it,
What day is that?
The
September
9th,
9th.
put it on.
I won't be there, but if one of you guys or both of you guys want to go, that's
Just send
fine.
us an email with a time on it.
I will do that.
Make sure one of us is there at some point.
'Cause, yeah,
And then those NIACOG surveys that I talked about, the last One Becko executive board meeting. I have 14 businesses in Worth County and 28 businesses in Winnebago County to follow up with. So I'll be working on that this week. In the meantime, if you know of any businesses in Worth County, Winworth Becko is kind of getting a little financial incentive on getting these surveys filled out.
come to me.
Okay. And then Kaylee's been writing weekly articles on small businesses. So if anybody is interested or showing interest in getting their business covered, and the local newspapers have been doing an amazing job of printing her articles. Send them my way and I'll get Kaylee and the business hooked up.
Sounds good.
All right.
Well, take care of the family over there. Hopefully everything goes okay. All
You bet.
right, thanks, Melissa.
Hey,
You
Melissa,
bet. Yeah,
let me know if we're still gonna meet with Brody then Friday.
that is my 14 days. Actually, it will be day 15. So it should be okay, but I'll keep you posted. We're going to go get tested today.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
All right. Now let's jump back to department heads. Dan, you got anything?
Only thing is I'm taking a small vacation, so I will be gone Friday through until Tuesday. So Chief Deputy Luther will be in charge of my department in my absence.
Sounds good. Joel, anything?
I do have next week, we are gonna go visit Audubon County. This will be our second time going there for an assessment, so first time we've done a twofer, I guess, kind of thing. Yeah, attended ISAC last week, pretty good meetings. I didn't get the ARPA stuff, sadly on the Secretary of State's and some other things, so. But it sounds like they had some pretty spirited discussions on the ARP funds. Still a lot of questions and answers, it sounds like, from what they're saying.
Figures.
Yeah.
All righty. Any other department heads out there in the Zoom world? Security Commission meeting?
10 o'clock Wednesday.
Teresa's heading out to Michigan, I think.
Whatever that is.
You're all
What's, you're on security, right, Mark? Or-
All
Right?
right, yeah.
For now,
Yeah.
right, and then we're rotating that.
He's the chair.
You're on
Yeah.
now.
right.
He's on now, and then we'll rotate next year, right?
His hand got raised.
I just run the meeting. You guys do the work.
All right. Supervisor Weekly, Enos.
I had a follow-up with Partners for Children because we had to get back the information for the girls circle for the RFP, and we got that back, so we scored it, approved it. And that was just about all that happened in that short meeting. That's all I had.
Sounds good.
I had nothing last week.
I just met with the group down in Manly again on Thursday. Kind of generating a lot of steam with 2 projects and possibly a third one that would be just outside of our county, but close. So we are working on that. Trying to figure out what they're gonna do for sure. And then as far as natural gas, been working with Northern Natural Gas on that, as well as the company that did our study before, to see where we can get gas to Manly and for that project. So with a little luck, we'll get more information this week, and every week we'll be getting more and more. So they need to have some stuff kind of set in place before the end of the year, because they've got a large amount of funding from USDA that they have to have commitments on, so hopefully we'll bring more information. Like I said, everything's still kind of quiet as far as what it's gonna be for sure, but once that comes out, then we can talk about it more in an open meeting, so. Other than that, that's all I had last week, so. Our landowner meeting is gonna go, sounds like.
Yeah.
Except for the 13th or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Cards out this week.
Sounds good. Anything else laid on the agenda? Okay, well, I'd take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
I'll second it.
all in favor, aye?
All right.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.